Every city has an origin story.
Welcome to Quote the Queen City, where we peel back the pages of Cincinnati's history.
Quote the Queen City! Quote the Queen City! We crack the case!
In this issue, we unmask a crisis event, not a single hero or villain, but a 3-day explosion of rage that tore the city apart. It's the story of a broken justice system, a rigged verdict, and a mob of 10,000 citizens who decided to burn the system down, quite literally.
Today, we unveil the origin story of the 1884 Courthouse Riots. Its tie to the Queen City? This is the darkest, bloodiest chapter in Cincinnati's history. It is an urban war that leveled the Hamilton County Courthouse, left dozens dead in the streets, and forever changed how our city was governed.
This is Christy.
And this is her sidekick, Joe.
And this is
Quote the Queen City.
To understand this crisis, we have to travel back to the early 1880s. Cincinnati was booming. The population was exploding, industry was thriving, but beneath it all, the city was incredibly corrupt. It was also exhausted. Just 1 month prior, in February 1884, the Ohio River crested at a catastrophic 71.9 feet, flooding the city and leaving the population on edge. It was essentially Gotham City before Batman showed up.
The justice system was completely broken. At the start of 1884, there were over 20 accused murderers sitting in the Hamilton County Jail, and depending on the records, there were between 50 and 71 unsolved or unpunished murders haunting the city. In fact, in 1884 and the preceding decade, there were almost no homicide convictions in Hamilton County. Most were simply reduced to felonious assault. To protect this booming city, Cincinnati had a heavily understaffed force of only 300 policemen and just 5 patrol wagons. Wealthy and connected criminals were easily bribing juries, intimidating witnesses, and paying off judges.
The citizens were terrified and exhausted. They felt like the law didn't exist anymore. And the ultimate supervillain of this era wasn't a mob boss. It was a defense attorney named Thomas C. Campbell. Born in New York, he moved to Cincinnati and practically seized control of the city's political machine. He was notorious across the city for mastering the dark arts of jury tampering, manipulating the courts, and getting cold-blooded killers back on the street.
The spark that blew this massive powder keg happened on Christmas Eve, 1883. It involved a man named William Kirk, a well-liked West End horse trader. 2 of his employees, a young white man named William Berner and a mixed-race man named Joseph Palmer, decided to rob him.
It was incredibly brutal. They bludgeoned and strangled William Kirk to death for a measly sum of just $245, which would be over $10,000 today. They then wrapped his body in canvas and dumped it near the Mill Creek, where it was discovered a few days later.
The police quickly caught Berner and Palmer, primarily because the 2 men went on an immediate, highly suspicious spending spree right after Christmas.
Duh.
They blew almost all the stolen money in a few weeks, with records showing they spent all but $70 rioting and partying around the city, drawing the attention of investigators. During police interviews, it became an absolute slam-dunk case. William Berner and Joseph Palmer both confessed to murdering Kirk in cold blood. The city thought, finally, justice will be served. They put Berner on trial first in late March of 1884.
But William Berner's family hired Thomas C. Campbell to defend him. And Campbell went right to work. He packed the jury with men who were known to be easily bribed or influenced. During the trial, despite a full confession and physical evidence, including the prosecution presenting 7 different witnesses to whom Berner openly admitted premeditating the murder, Campbell worked his dark magic. On March 26, 1884, the jury came back with a verdict that shocked the entire state.
They found a confessed cold-blooded killer not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter, meaning he would escape the noose and get a light prison sentence of 20 years. Even the presiding judge was absolutely horrified. In open court, the judge actually called the jury's verdict a damned outrage before handing down the sentence.
When the city heard the verdict, they didn't just get angry, they snapped. The collective rage was uncontrollable. The public immediately began targeting the compromised jury. Juror James Bourne was threatened by a mob and had to spend the night hiding in a local police station, while another juror, Charles Dullahan, was pelted with rotten eggs, and the local media threw gasoline on the fire.
The Cincinnati Enquirer, led by publisher John R. McLean, ran furious front-page editorials condemning the verdict, the judge, the jury, and the lawyer. The paper openly lamented the state of the city, stating, "Preeminence in art, science, and industry avail nothing, where murder is rampant and the lives of citizens are unsafe even in broad daylight."
So on the evening of Friday, March 28, 1884, a massive public meeting was called at Music Hall. About 1,000 enraged citizens packed into the auditorium, but thousands more were spilling out onto Elm Street and Washington Park because they simply couldn't fit inside.
The crowd wasn't just a bunch of outlaws. The city's elite, doctors, lawyers, merchants, and respected business owners took the stage to give fiery speeches condemning the corrupt courts. They wanted to form a legal, organized committee to investigate jury tampering.
But you can't put a leash on an angry mob that large. The crowd didn't want a petition. They didn't want a committee. They wanted blood.
In the middle of the speeches, as people were surging out onto Elm Street, someone in the crowd yelled, "Fall in! Let's go to the jail! Let's hang Burner!"
And just like that, the meeting turned into a mob. Thousands of people surged out the doors of Music Hall. They marched directly toward the Hamilton County Jail on Sycamore Street, above Court Street, chanting for the murderer's head. By the time they arrived at the jail, the crowd had swollen to an estimated 10,000 people.
The mob arrived at the jail and absolute chaos broke out. The Hamilton County Jail was a massive fortress-like structure right next to the courthouse. The crowd surrounded the building, howling with anger. Men in the street started tearing up heavy paving stones and hurling them at the windows.
They grabbed heavy pieces of joist, timber, crowbars, and other weapons, passing them down to men that were at the front. They used these as literal battering rams to smash through the heavy basement doors at the front of the stone steps. Sheriff Morton Lytle Hawkins and his deputies were completely powerless to stop the human tide pouring inside, especially since the sheriff had initially ordered his men not to fire on the crowd.
The rioters broke into the jail office and forced their way through the heavy iron-grated doors, running up the winding stone stairways and into the cell blocks. They were holding torches and lanterns, peering into every cell, hunting for William Burner. But here is the massive plot twist of the night. The police knew the mob was coming.
They had to think fast. Before the mob broke down the doors, the police shaved off Burner's mustache, dressed him in a police officer's uniform, and secretly smuggled him out. They put him on a train headed to the state penitentiary in Columbus to save his life.
And here's the crazy piece of local trivia. The mob actually found out he was on that train. A group of vigilantes telegraphed ahead, intercepted the train in Loveland, Ohio, and almost successfully lynched him right there on the tracks. The authorities barely managed to fight them off. Interestingly, Burner did manage to escape during the transport, but he was recaptured a day later, casually playing cards in a nearby house.
Back in Cincinnati, when the mob realized Burner was gone, they immediately went looking for his accomplice, Joseph Palmer. And this is one of the most unbelievable moments of the night. When the rioters reached Palmer's cell, Palmer actually managed to convince the screaming mob that he was not the man they were looking for, and they passed right by him. These are not the droids you're looking
That's
for.
crazy. Wow, that's some guts. Furious that they were empty-handed, the mob's anger shifted from the murderers to the system itself. They started dragging out other prisoners, trashing the jail, and fighting the police in brutal hand-to-hand combat. A squad of 15 policemen tried to clear the jail but were tossed aside like rag dolls. Inside, the jail was severely overcrowded. Defenders had to hastily erect barricades using whatever they could find, wagons, grindstones, barrels of salt, to protect the 117 local militiamen and hundreds of trapped police officers.
The city was falling. Governor George Hoadley dispatched 400 members of the Ohio militia to guard Court Street, ordering all state-owned ammunition routed directly to Cincinnati. The soldiers arrived and had to physically force the rioters out of the jail at bayonet point. By the end of Friday night, the jail was secured, but one police officer and 4 rioters were dead.
You would think that seeing the military arrive and people dying would cool things down. Instead, the Enquirer whipped the citizens into a frenzy on Saturday morning, writing that the enraged community was rising in its might. The foreman of the jury was so terrified he actually had to hide in the jail overnight to escape from being lynched.
The military built massive barricades out of lumber, sandbags, and barrels around the jail and the courthouse. But the mob realized they couldn't fight soldiers with their bare hands, so they spread out into downtown Cincinnati. They raided local pawn shops, hardware stores, and armories. They completely cleaned out Powell's hardware store, stealing hundreds of rifles, shotguns, revolvers, and thousands of rounds of ammunition.
It was no longer a riot, it was an all-out urban war. Because the rioters realized they couldn't penetrate the heavily guarded jail, they turned their attention to the symbol of the corrupt justice system next door, the 1852 Hamilton County Courthouse.
The rioters poured petroleum and coal oil down the steps into the tunnel that connected the jail and the courthouse, and they set it entirely ablaze. They also broke the windows and threw kerosene bombs and dynamite inside. When the magnificent 1852 courthouse caught fire, the mob physically blocked the firemen from reaching the building to put out the blaze.
And this is where the tragedy compounds for historians and genealogists. The Hamilton County Courthouse fire destroyed decades of priceless, irreplaceable city records. Property deeds, birth records, census data, marriage licenses, and court documents from the founding of the city all the way up to 1884 were completely incinerated. The history of the city literally turned to ash, along with the extensive law library.
You may recall in our Theda Barra episode, her birth certificate is one of the ones that was destroyed that night. So amidst the flames and the gunfire, we have to talk about the tragic hero of this issue, Captain John J. Desmond. He was a prominent, highly respected 32-year-old local lawyer and the son of Irish immigrants, who also served as captain in the local militia.
While leading a squad of soldiers trying to protect the burning courthouse and push back the rioters, Captain Desmond was shot in the head and killed in the street. He died trying to protect the very justice system the mob was trying to destroy.
His death shocked the militia. To stop the rioters from completely overtaking the entire city, the military commander ordered Gatling guns to be brought to the barricades. They fired them directly down the streets into the crowds. The violence got so out of hand that Secretary of War Robert Todd Lincoln even dispatched the U.S. Army to Cincinnati. After 3 days of absolute terror, lead, and fire, the military finally broke the mob and restored order on Sunday.
That's crazy. A Gatling gun is a hand-cranked machine gun. It would not have been a pretty scene to be on the receiving end.
Yeah, yikes.
The smoke finally cleared on March 31st, and the toll was staggering. The Hamilton County Courthouse was a gutted, smoking ruin. Depending on the historical source, between 50 and 56 people were dead, and more than 300 were severely wounded. It remains one of the deadliest riots in American history.
So what happened to the villains? Following the riots, prominent attorneys, including a young William Howard Taft, began disbarment proceedings against Thomas Campbell. The corrupt lawyer eventually fled the city. The citizens hated him so much he couldn't practice law in Cincinnati anymore, so he moved back to New York. William Berner, the murderer who started it all, only served 11 years of his 20-year sentence before moving to Indiana.
But what about his accomplice, Joseph Palmer? Because of the riots, the courts didn't dare give Palmer a sweet deal. He was tried, found guilty of murder, and sent to the gallows. He was hanged in Columbus on July 15, 1885, for the exact same crime his partner got manslaughter for.
But the most fascinating outcome of the 1884 courthouse riots was the political vacuum it created. The citizens of Cincinnati were deeply traumatized by the violence. They wanted order and stability at any cost.
Out of those ashes rose a man named George Boss Cox,
Ugh.
a former saloon keeper and Republican operative who had actually served as Campbell's own political protege. Boss Cox used the fear generated by the riots to step into his mentor's shoes and build a massive, tightly controlled political machine. For the next 30 years, Boss Cox ran Cincinnati with an iron fist. He reorganized the police, paved the streets, and brought the order the city begged for, but it cost them their democratic voice, as every judge, politician, and contractor answered directly to him.
We are definitely going to do an issue on George Boss Cox, for sure. So let's enter the Hall of Justice to see the scars left behind by the fall of Gotham.
The massive courthouse we have today, that huge stone building sitting on Main Street, was built on the exact same site to replace the one the rioters burned down.
But before you even walk through the front doors, if you head over to Sycamore Street near the current Justice Center, you'll find an official double-sided Ohio historical marker standing guard.
It's marker 19-31, placed to remember the exact spot where the siege began. One side details the sheer destruction of the 1884 Courthouse Riots, the destruction of the city's records, and the 54 lives lost in the streets.
And on the other side, it honors Sheriff Morton Lytle Hawkins. It immortalizes how he, along with a small group of his deputies, stood their ground to save the jail from a complete takeover and successfully protected the lives of the inmates trapped inside.
Then, if you walk into the main lobby of the current Hamilton County Courthouse today, you'll see a life-size bronze statue.
It's the statue of Captain John J. Desmond, holding the flag he was carrying when he was killed. It was erected by the citizens of Cincinnati to honor the hero who stood his ground and did his duty when the city went mad.
The 1884 riots remind us that a city is only as strong as its trust in justice. When that trust breaks, the whole city burns.
This issue is in the books. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this piece of history with a friend.
We'll see you in the next issue. Thanks for joining us for
Quote the Queen City.